Tonight we are here and blessed with Dr. Jim McAfee and Marilyn Plum, two very, very special genius minds. And we are going to go through some pre-selected questions that people had asked and cover those. And Dr. Jim is going to give us his expert opinion on a few of the questions. And Marilyn will chime in as well. So welcome and thanks for joining us, Dr. Jim and Marilyn.
My pleasure.
So is Shirley familiar with Neolife or?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I would like to also say welcome to everyone. You know, my friend, elderly friend, Jeannie Eldridge's, Fred Eldridge's husband said to me when I first joined the company, he said, I wish you health, I wish you wealth, I wish you fortune and fame, but I'm careful to wish you health first, for without it, nothing else matters very much. And that's the passion, that's our heart, is to share how people can have optimal, vibrant health all the days of their life. And my life was dramatically changed in 1985 when I was introduced to this company. And my passion has only grown in sharing the information with others. So I'm going to let Jim go ahead and he will read the questions that have been asked, I guess, or do you want me to read them?
Why don't you read them?
Pardon me?
You can read them if you wish.
Okay.
One at a time.
One at a time?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the first questions I got was from someone, and she was convinced to go off her statin drugs because of the side effects she was having, but now her cholesterol's they consider very high and they want her to go back. So she had questions about the good and the bad cholesterol and that whole scenario.
Well, that's a big question. Generally, good cholesterol is considered to be HDL and bad cholesterol is LDL. Although recently they've started fractionating the LDL into good and bad LDL as well. One of the things that I oftentimes tell people is that it's normal for cholesterol to go up a little bit as you get older, and actually people with a little higher cholesterol live longer than people whose cholesterol is a little lower. So I don't worry a whole lot about cholesterol. It used to be that they weren't concerned about it until the cholesterol was over 250. And then they lowered it. And one of the reasons that it got lowered was to sell more statin medications. The really important thing with cholesterol is it relates to heart disease, is whether the cholesterol is oxidized or not.
Mm-hmm.
Oxycholesterol is 500 times more atherogenic than non-oxidized cholesterol. All the early studies that implicated cholesterol in heart disease were all done with cholesterol stored in a jar, and it was all oxidized. And when they repeated those studies in 1974 with non-oxidized cholesterols, they found that cholesterol was causing atherosclerosis 500 times more slowly when it was not oxidized. So that prevention of oxidation of cholesterol is really important. You can get oxidized cholesterol in two ways. Number one, it can spontaneously oxidize in your circulatory system if you don't have sufficient antioxidant intake. For example, the Neolife carotenoid complex, they studied that with regard to oxidation of cholesterol. And when people supplemented with 3 carotenoid complex capsules a day, it reduced the oxidation of the cholesterol in the blood 5-fold. So that's a pretty powerful protective effect. You can also prevent oxidation of cholesterol with vitamin C and vitamin E and other antioxidants. And that's an important thing to consider, both dietarily. You want to consume carotenoids and flavonoids and polyphenols and C and E, but also supplement-wise, you can supplement with those things if you have a risk of heart disease, and it'll greatly decrease the risk. The other way to avoid oxidized cholesterol is not to eat it. And most of your fast food, particularly anything that's cooked at a high temperature, is going to have a lot of oxidized cholesterol in there. Aged cheeses, anything that has a high fat content, fried foods, those are all loaded with oxidized cholesterol. And they can induce atherosclerosis and clotting in the arteries very rapidly. So you want to be very judicious diet-wise in consuming high-fat foods, particularly high-fat foods that have been sitting around for a long time. Could be like sausages and things that have sat around for a long time, or powdered eggs, aged cheeses, all those things have a lot of oxidized cholesterol. And avoiding those things will greatly reduce your risk of developing heart disease, which is the #1 killer in the country. So this is an important topic to think about and consider.
Okay, well, thank you. So you say that heart disease is the #1 killer right now, huh? I thought it was doctor induced. No, prescriptions.
It could be. One other thing I should throw in, there are a number of ways of bringing cholesterol down besides statin medications. The Neolife lipotropic adjunct is very good for this. It lowers both cholesterol and triglyceride. And years ago, there was a Dr. Macera up in Reno that tested his patients to see how effective lipotropic was in lowering cholesterol. He found with 2 a day, 2/3 of his patients had a drop in cholesterol and triglycerides, and with 4 a day, all of them had a drop in cholesterol.
What was the percentage with 2 a day?
Um, 2/3 of them had a drop with 2
Okay.
a day, and all of them had a drop with 4 a day. And one of the very first distributors that we had, Herman Tiburon, he had real problems. Both he and his wife had problems with cholesterol, and not only the internal cholesterol, but also obesity. And he and his wife used a large number of lipotropics. I think for a while he was taking 6 lipotropics per meal, and he lost a bunch of weight and was able to grow hair, all kinds of benefits that he experienced from that. And the lipotropic also is designed to provide substances that help with the DNA functioning, keep the DNA epigenetics, or the nutrition above the DNA functioning properly. And Dr. Joaquin Gonzalez actually started Neolife because he was looking for something like the lipotropic adjunct. And when he found it in Mexico, he immediately ordered something like 36 cases of it or something. And the distributor that was handling it there didn't know what to do, so he told him to get to the company and get his product. But he's found that a very helpful supplement for a lot of people. There are other ways that doctors could do if they wanted to prescribe things.
Yeah.
They could do something
Before you move on from lipotropic adjunct,
uh-huh.
I think it's helpful. It's a Latin word, which lipo means fat, lipotropic adjunct, fat eater helper. And so it acts as a roto-rooter for your arteries. It goes in and helps clean out your arteries, which is so valuable and important. But I remember Don Lawson telling a story about a man who had diabetes, and he got a sore on his leg that didn't heal, and they had to amputate his leg. And his other leg was starting with a sore, and they were saying they were going to have to amputate. and his sister found Neolife, and she had him take the lipotropic adjunct. I think he was taking 23 a day, but it saved his leg, and got completely healed up. So I don't know, I wouldn't recommend that people take that much, but it's
I don't recommend people do more than 3 times what's on the label.
right. 3 times what's recommended.
It's best to start with the label recommendation on things.
Yeah. Now, a
Usually,
question. You said that we know we need cholesterol. If we don't eat enough, our body produces it. It's very important for our brain and our nerves. And you said that older people that have a little bit higher cholesterol tend to live longer. So, and then you're talking about what to do to bring down your cholesterol. So can you maybe clarify a little bit of the distinction there?
well, some people, they tell me they want to bring their cholesterol down, whether, whether I think it's a problem or not. So there are ways to naturally do that. And lipotropic is one way. Vitamin B3 tends to lower cholesterol. Also, phytosterols, as you have in the treonine, will lower cholesterol because they compete with cholesterol for absorption into the digestive tract. All of those are natural things that can be done. And the vitamin B3 in the form of niacin has been written up in the medical literature as far superior to statin drugs as a way of bringing down cholesterol.
B3? You said
Vitamin B3, yeah.
B3, and that's B like boy.
Right.
So we don't carry B3 by itself. We have a B complex. Would it be just as effective?
Well, the form that they've done in medical testing is the unbuffered form that causes the flush, which some people find difficult to tolerate. It turns you beet red for about 20 minutes or so. So I prefer to do the lipotropic as the first thing. And then, if that doesn't bring the cholesterol low enough, then you can do niacin or you can do treonine to bring the cholesterol down further. But I would not be paranoid about a cholesterol level was just slightly above the recommended amount, as long as you had sufficient antioxidant intake.
Right. Yeah, I like that book, The Cholesterol Myth. Basically says cholesterol is not a problem at all unless it oxidizes, like you're saying. So
it's people don't understand how damaging the statin medications can be. Dr. Dwayne Graveline was a physician, and he was with NASA. And when they tested him, his cholesterol was elevated. Now, at the time they tested him, he was a vigorous astronaut. He was living in Vermont. He was going out chopping his own trees down for firewood. And, he was very energetic. He was flying his own plane and, doing all the athletic stuff that astronauts do. They put him on statin medications. The first thing that happened was he began to have transient amnesia, and he couldn't remember, how to get home, and he forgot how to fly his plane, and I think he got lost going home one time, and that was a transient thing. It corrected itself when he went off the statin medication. He was on Lipitor, and he wrote a book about this called Lipitor Thief of Memory. And at the time he had this problem, they said he was a unique case, but he found hundreds of cases that were similar to this. Anyway, a couple of years later, they tested him again, and so he decided to go back on the Lipitor, and the same thing happened. He developed the memory loss, but then one of the things, cholesterol is involved not only in synthesis of cholesterol in the body, but it's also involved in synthesis of CoQ10. And CoQ10 is the primary antioxidant in the mitochondria where energy is produced in the body. And one of the consequences of insufficient CoQ10 in the body is that you begin to have a degeneration of the muscles. And what happened to Dr. Graveline is he wound up in a wheelchair, and only with great difficulty was he able to make a partial recovery after that damage. But what happens is the mitochondria begin to be severely damaged when you don't have enough CoQ10. There's actually a patent for the use of CoQ10 with statin drugs, but for some reason, most doctors never recommend the use of CoQ10 with the statins. And that has a lot of implications. The lack of CoQ10 involves not only the muscle, but it can also affect the brain. And some of these statin medications have been shown to contribute to memory loss, and also changes in emotion. There's something called a dolichoral, which regulates emotion, and road rage has also been associated with some of the statin medications. So they're not a totally safe medication, and the more a person takes, the greater the likelihood they're going to suffer the consequences of lack of CoQ10 or the interference with dolichoral functioning in the brain.
It sounds like the medication is worse than the problem. But what if somebody didn't do any medication and their cholesterol got real high? What is there really that much risk with that?
Well, there are some people that have a familial tendency to have high cholesterol, and those people probably need to look at doing something about it. But there's other options besides statin drugs like niacin that would be a safer way to go, I think.
So does high cholesterol, does it
What
actually lead?
the statin drugs do, they do two things. One of them is they block the synthesis of the cholesterol pathway in the brain, which is tied in with CoQ10 and dolichols. But they also are pretty potent anti-inflammatory substances. And some people think that the primary benefits that come from statin medications are on the anti-inflammatory side rather than on the cholesterol lowering side. And so when you're thinking about this, you want to think about the fact, what can I do naturally, not only to bring down cholesterol, but what can I do to decrease inflammation in the body? And that's where your salmon oil and your flavonoids really are very powerful natural anti-inflammatories. And those should be considered, I think, always when you're looking at heart disease, because heart disease is very much an inflammatory problem.
Yeah. You know, some years ago, I was in Chicago and I met a medical doctor from the Philippines, and he was a heart specialist, and his wife was also a heart specialist. And he was scheduled for quadruple bypass surgery. Somebody told him about Neolife. He chose to do that instead of any surgery or medicine. And I'm talking to him 7 years later, still no surgery, and he wasn't on a single prescription. And he said, I can help a lot more people with Neolife than I ever could as a medical doctor heart specialist.
Yeah, I always think of a study that I read by Maynard Murray, where they looked at sea mammals, walruses, seals, and whales that all have a high omega-3 intake from their diet naturally. And they examined thousands of these animals. They didn't find a single case of cancer, of joint problems, or of heart disease in even one of the animals. So those omega-3 oils, which are lacking in the American diet for the most part, are key protective substances that we need to incorporate in the diet.
Yeah. Yeah. And when animals used to graze, like eating deer meat or something like that, you're going to get a higher percentage of omega-3. And that's why, I know you always encourage people to get grass-fed beef. And that's a huge benefit for people as far as heart disease and getting the healthy fats.
And
Remember,
there's all the difference in the world between a cow eating grass and a cow eating corn. Corn
Yeah.
is all omega-6 fat. Grass is all omega-3. And cows are meant to eat grass. They weren't meant to stuff themselves on corn.
mhm,
In nature, there's only a short period of the year when, buffalo or cattle would have access to seeds, most of which are high in omega-6. Rest of the time, they would be feeding on grasses, and all your grasses and your green vegetables are high in omega-3. Unfortunately, in the American diet, most people, they don't eat a lot of greens. They're eating a lot of corn and wheat and things like that, and the omega-3 intake is very low.
yeah. I love our omega-3 that's in the Trehan and in our salmon oil. So, okay. Well, thank you very much. That was
Also in the Pro Vitality. And I always recommend when you're trying to deal with any problem, start with the Pro Vitality because it has the salmon oil and the carotenoid and the treanin in there, as well as all your vitamins and minerals. So it's a really good base to build a program on, no matter what the problem is.
great. Thank you. So the next question was somebody who has had severe nerve damage, a botched surgery, and then other things. What can be done to restore the nerves? Or actually, let me just tell you that there's 3 more questions, and I don't think we're going to have time to get to all of them. So you can maybe choose. That's one of them. The other one is we're getting asked a lot of questions about what can we do to detoxify. Like some people feel like maybe the shot has caused them some problems, and what can we do to detoxify? And the third one, let's see, Joy, you sent me one too. Let me go ahead and start with one of those, and then I'll look up the other one.
Let's talk about nerves. Nerves, it used to be thought that when you had nerve damage, there was no possibility of repair. The nerve cells would die. But recently, there's been a lot of studies showing that you can get neurogenesis, which means the creation of new nerves over time. It's a very slow process, which is why
Really?
they didn't recognize that for quite a while. But one of the key compounds for neurogenesis is the omega-3s again. And one doctor likened omega-3 fats to fertilizer for the nerves because it really boosts their functioning. The omega-3s vibrate 100 million times a second, so they confer a lot of dynamic to cell membranes and things like that. And so they will allow nerves to repair themselves. Nerves are about 60 to 70% fat. And so when you're looking at nerves, there's 2 key things you want to do. You want to provide them energy because they use a lot of energy, and they need quality fats in the diet. In the quality fat area, you want things like lecithin with all the phospholipids in there, treanin, and salmon oil. Those are the key fats. Cholesterol also is part of the membrane of nerves. And any of those fats, when they're deficient, you can suffer nerve problems. And to heal nerve damage, you need all those fats. The other thing is you need to support the energy production of the mitochondria. The brain has like 2% of the body weight, but it uses about 20 to 25% of the total energy that's used by the body. And so it's a very dynamic tissue, and it needs oxygen and it needs energy, and that comes from the mitochondria. So again, we're looking at CoQ10 as a key nutrient for brain and nerve function and protection. and the other fat-soluble antioxidants, in particular, carotenoid and vitamin E, very, very important. And I always like to include a little bit of vitamin C with the fat-soluble antioxidants because the antioxidants work like a chain brigade, so that a carotenoid will grab a free radical and it'll pass it on to vitamin E, and then vitamin E passes the free radical on to vitamin C, and vitamin C carries the free radical out of the body. So fat-soluble antioxidants and antioxidants in general, CoQ10 is a fat-soluble antioxidant. And then your quality fats are key things for nerve function. You also want to make sure you're not deficient in the things that are involved in energy production, which is some of the B vitamins and magnesium, very, very important for energy production.
I'm writing like crazy.
There was also a question about tinnitus, and in my experience, tinnitus is usually caused by exposure to very loud sounds. Most of the people that I know with the problem have been in the military, or they're gun enthusiasts, and what that does is that can damage the hearing. There have been some studies showing that some of the nutrients like vitamin B1 and magnesium can improve the ability to tolerate loud sounds, but it's very difficult to reverse tinnitus and hearing problems when severe damage has been done. You can get some, I've seen some improvement, but I have not seen a total recovery when the hearing has been damaged by real loud noises. So it's worthwhile for a young person to try and protect themselves from loud noises. If you're going to a concert, take some earplugs with you. Or if the church has real loud music, which I went to a church that did one time. My mother had problems hearing, so she loved it because she could hear things well. But I always carried hearing earplugs in my Bible so I could stick it in my ears when I went to that church with her.
So I always pronounce it tinnitus, but you're saying tinnitus? Yes, I'm not. Anyway.
People pronounce it different ways.
Okay. So is that the tinnitus, is that also involved with the nerves?
Yes. It's
okay.
Usually caused by damage to the nerves in the ear.
Okay. So the nerves in the brain, as I understand it, are the two highest sources of lipids or fats. So salmon oil.
All the things I talked about with regard to the brain would be involved with improving hearing and eyesight, because both the eyes and the ears are directly tied into the brain.
Right. Okay. So I would think vitamin A would be helpful because of the way it strengthens the mucous membrane linings. Is that?
Vitamin A is a fat-soluble vitamin also.
Okay.
The American diet is pitifully short on fat-soluble vitamins. It's vitamin A, D, E, K, carotenoids, all of those nutrients, CoQ10. They're all important, and we tend to be low in them. Food sources, butter, which a lot of people are on a low-fat diet. If you have butter from cows that are out in the field eating grass, there's going to be vitamin D there, and K2, and vitamin A, all those nutrients. But when you do margarine or you use other fats in the diet, coconut oil, things like that, you don't get those fat-soluble vitamins. And without the intake of a food like that, you're going to tend to wind up deficient. It's estimated that primitive peoples consumed about 10 times the fat-soluble vitamins that modern man does.
Wow.
Weston Price, he has a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration.
I know that vitamin A has been a life change for me. Got rid of all my allergies. At 40, I had night blindness. I had to stop driving at night. And I started taking the vitamin A for my allergies. And now I can drive at night all the time. It's really made quite a difference, along with the carotenoids. So you said that
Let me share a story there. I did a garden tour. I have a garden down in Auburn, all kinds of fruit trees, and in the springtime, the trees all blossom at one time. And one year I did a garden tour right in the middle of the flowering of all the fruit trees. And a fellow came up and he was allergy prone. His eyes and nose started gushing. And so after we did a walk through the garden, I invited everyone in the house, and I was making ice cream from the produce from the garden. And he said, "Oh, I'm miserable." And his eyes and nose were just running. So I said, "Well, let's try something." And I took some vitamin A and a glass of water, and I handed it to him, and I said, "Take this." And within 10 minutes, his sinuses had all dried up. And he said, "This is amazing." And he signed up and became a director in Neolife.
Yeah, I've had many similar experiences. Even with the young man that had asthma that was here playing in our yard, and he wanted me to take him to emergency. And I says, "Before I do that, let me give you this." He didn't end up needing to go. So, but now you mentioned about butter being a good fat, and that it has the A and the K and the D, but you said if you use coconut oil, that doesn't have that.
That's correct. Yeah.
There are some other benefits from coconut oil, but
Coconut oil has medium chain triglycerides, which are an alternative source of energy for brain function. The brain runs either on glucose or ketones. So sometimes they're calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes now, which means that the brain of someone with Alzheimer's is functioning like the body of the diabetic. In other words, they can't use glucose for energy. So there have been some people that have been using ketones in the form of coconut oil or medium chain triglycerides as in supplement form to provide an alternative source for brain function. And in some of those cases, the recovery has been quite spectacular. They've also used ketones in situations where individuals had epilepsy. And it seems to stabilize the brain function and prevent the seizures.
wow.
Greatly reduce them. So
You
coconut
said
oil.
You said they supplement with coconut oil. Would cooking with coconut oil do the same thing, or?
Yes, as long as it's got the triglycerides in there, the medium chain triglycerides, it's going to provide the benefit.
What is there coconut oil that wouldn't have the medium?
There's a book by Mary Newport, and it's called "What If There Was a Cure?" It's about how she treated her husband with coconut oil. And he was a very bad case of Alzheimer's and regained his brain function. And one of the things is that some of the ketones are available rapidly and some more slowly. I think the MCT, the medium chain triglyceride fats, are available rapidly. Coconut oil more slowly. So if I remember correctly, she was using both to improve her husband's brain function.
Yeah, I read about that. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. That's very helpful with the nerves. My friend couldn't be on tonight. He's a musician and he had a gig, as he calls it. But so and then the tinnitus, that was helpful also.
Let me share one other thing too. when I do my fats in my diet, I alternate between um, cow butter, real yellow cow butter from animals that are grazing in the pasture, and goat butter. Goat butter is very high in medium chain triglycerides. So you get the benefit there, whereas with the cow butter, you get much more of the fat soluble nutrients. So I switch between the two. Meyerberg has a very good goat butter. You'll see that in health food stores and a lot of supermarkets. And then the butter is usually designated as organic from pastured cows. So both of those are good fats to use for cooking and putting on bread, things like that.
Okay. Yeah, I was just reading about that one study that was done among a healthy group of people. One of the things they found is that they were eating goat cheese every day. So I guess that's kind of along the same.
Goat cheese is very easy to digest and forms smaller curds than cow's milk. And it's got a lot of nutrients in it.
Yeah. Now, you said not to eat aged cheese, though, because the fats in it would be rancid.
The cheeses that are aged for a long period of time, like 180 days, so you're going to have a lot of, if there's fat in there, it's going to be rancid.
Okay. Even if it's
like Parmesan has a lot of, most commercial Parmesan's pretty oxidized. Whereas if you're using more of a green cheese like mozzarella, you don't need to worry about that.
Okay. So with Parmesan, it's better to grate your own fresh from a bar of Parmesan cheese.
Yeah, well, they have like health food Parmesan too that hasn't been aged like that. And I use that periodically in my cooking in the summertime.
Okay. Great. Do you remember the other question I had, or the the detox?
Detox, yes.
Somebody was asking, they said, can you explain how the 3-day detox works and its benefits? Also, is it possible for anyone who took the COVID vaccine to detox some of its toxins?
Yeah, well, the COVID vaccine, what it tends to do is it sets someone up for increased risk of clotting disorders. So you want to do the nutrients that prevent clotting. And nutritionally, the two most important of those are magnesium. Magnesium has a pretty potent anti-clotting effect, and so does salmon oil. Also, enzymes tend to suppress inflammation and clotting as well. So those three supplements would be good for someone that's having problems after the vaccination. And then the other thing would be just broad spectrum supplementation. As far as the 3-day detox and the nutrients that are in there, the detox compounds are it has acidophilus, garlic, tea, and the Neolife shake are the things that are recommended for the detox. Let's talk briefly about each of those. Acidophilus is designed to get good organisms in the colon and to crowd out disease-causing ones. There is a direct pathway or superhighway between the gut and the brain called the vagus nerve. And the brain can affect how the gut functions, but also the gut can determine how the brain functions. In our recent neurologic conference in Fort Worth, there was a lot of discussion of how the wrong kinds of microbes in the gut were having an impact upon things like autism and attention deficit and depression, all kinds of different anxiety, all kinds of different health problems. And Neolife acidophilus. It has 5 of the best bacterial organisms that are normally found in the guts of healthy people. 4 of those come out of Scandinavia, 1 comes out of Japan. And they are.
I'm sorry, you said 1 comes out of Japan, and where was the other one?
1 comes out of Japan, 4 come out of Scandinavia.
Okay.
And what they do is they're involved in synthesis of vitamins. They are placeholders. They press out pathogenic organisms. One of the problems that we have today is most of our food is contaminated with glyphosate or Roundup residues. Roundup is actually patented as an antibiotic. And what it does is it kills off all the beneficial organisms in the gut. Then you get the survival of organisms that are antibiotic resistant. And there are some pretty nasty organisms that are antibiotic resistant. Botulism is one of those, and they do tend to find elevated levels of botulism in people that work with Roundup and people that consume a lot of it. So what you're doing with the acidophilus complex is you're replacing the beneficial bacteria in the gut that are killed off by these constant residues of Roundup that are in the food, or just use of antibiotics. A regimen of antibiotics will kill off all your beneficial organisms, but the spore-based pathogens can survive a round of antibiotics with no difficulty at all. And then it's like plowing a field, and the pathogens are like weeds that come up in a garden. They're always waiting to proliferate there. So the acidophilus crowds these things out. When you get the wrong kinds of organisms in the gut, what happens is there's something called the lipopolysaccharide, which is in the membrane of bacteria that are antibiotic resistant. It's technically, they call it LPS in a lot of the scientific literature. It is so inflammatory that they use it in experiments with animals to induce inflammation in the body. And they have shown that probiotic supplementation can lower the levels of LPS. It goes way up when people eat junk food, things like French fries and potato chips and things like that. And supplementation with probiotics can help to prevent that skyrocketing of LPS and inflammatory disorders in the body.
You're saying LPS?
Yeah, so that stands for lipopolysaccharide. It's a compound that's in the membrane of pathogenic cells, and it really switches the immune system on, causes a lot of inflammation.
Okay.
So it's a good idea to avoid the junk food that causes the elevation of this, because it does affect a lot of mood disorders, as well as causing inflammation throughout the body that can lead to any kind of inflammatory disorder.
I know that they're finding the glyphosate in almost all box cereals.
Yes, and in one study, Cheerios came out with the highest level.
That's sad, and everybody gives their babies the little Cheerios to snack on.
Yeah, the problem is what they're doing now with both wheat and oats is they are using Roundup as a desiccant, which means they spray it on the crop to kill off the field so that everything dies at the same time, and they can harvest with the mechanical equipment without having a problem with fungus growth. But at the same time, you're spraying this on just before harvest so that you get very high residues of Roundup in the food. So anyway, that's the first thing in the detox, and that's the way it's working is it's normalizing the bacteria in the gut. The second thing that's recommended is the garlic, and garlic is one of several key foods that are very high in sulfur. Others would be cruciferous vegetables and ginger and eggs. And sulfur is a key detox compound. The body has two steps of detox. There's phase one, which makes toxins more soluble, and phase two carries them out of the body. And we tend to be weak in the phase two category because people don't get enough sulfur containing foods in the diet. And garlic is known to boost glutathione, which is the body's primary antioxidant. It also it has benefits for heart health. It can help with allergies. It can kill off pathogens like Candida albicans. The only natural compound that's super effective in killing off yeasts is garlic. The other thing is that garlic has very powerful cancer-fighting properties. There was a study done by an individual named Boivin and her associates. And what they did is they took 8 major cancer cell lines in 34 different food extracts. And they tested the food extracts to see which of them would inhibit the different cancer cell lines. There was only one food that knocked out the growth of all 8 cancer cell lines, and that was garlic and other allium vegetables, garlic and onion, both very effective there. And the allium complex has all of the allium family. So the garlic has a lot of benefits. It boosts immune function. There's a way that the body gets rid of heavy metal toxins like lead and cadmium, and that's done with glutathione and also with something called metallothionein. And garlic tends to boost levels of both of those compounds. So a lot of benefit as far as detox with garlic. Another one of the compounds in the detox is tea. And we don't normally think of tea as a detox compound, but it's actually one of the most powerful detox substances that is in the diet. And people who drink a lot of tea, they have a lot fewer health problems. Tea is loaded with polyphenols, which are water-soluble antioxidants. They're complementary to the carotenoids and help the carotenoids do a better job. And also, tea has been shown to boost brain function. So Neolife has the tea as a tea. It's also in the flavonoid complex and the new product Elevate, which is designed to optimize brain function, has tea as well. So tea is really good. And one of the things there is it can actually get into the brain and improve the antioxidant status of brain and nerve tissue. That's very good. And then the final thing that's in that detox program is the Neolife Shake. And basically everything that goes on in the body is regulated by protein. The proteins are used to manufacture peptides, and each individual little peptide in the body does different kinds of things. So when we get all 22 amino acids, as you have in the Neolife Shakes, you can form all these peptides. And one of the critical things on protein, we need adequate quantity of protein, but we also need quality of protein that can be digested. One of the things that we tend to do in our society is we overcook our protein. And when you heat protein, you actually change its structure and its digestibility. And there are 3 stages to the degradation of protein. The first one is illustrated by boiling an egg. A raw egg you can blend in water and it blends just fine. When you cook the egg, it turns from a water-loving protein, what we call hydrophilic, which means water-loving, to hydrophobic, which means water-fearing. And a boiled egg is very hard to mix in water. To actually change the structure of the protein so it doesn't relate too well to water anymore. The second stage of degradation of protein is what's called the browning effect, or scientifically it's called the Maillard reaction. And anytime you brown a protein, you introduce combinations of protein with carbohydrate, and these are called Maillard molecules. The body has no enzyme to break down a browned protein, so it's basically a waste product. And the body actually has a burden. It's a burden on the liver to process these things and excrete them. And the Maillard proteins, they actually are believed to promote aging. They have an acronym for it. They call it AGEs, Advanced Glycosylation End Products. But these proteins that have been denatured, they actually accelerate the aging process and age-related diseases. So doing a lot of, heavily toasted crackers and breakfast cereals like grape nuts is run through the ovens twice. It's got a lot of Maillard molecules in there. And when you choose a cereal, you've got a choice of doing something like a muesli, or you can do a flake cereal that's been run through a real high temperature oven. It's better to do the oatmeal or the muesli that hasn't had a high temperature applied to it. The third stage of degeneration of protein is what's called blackening, where you actually char the protein until it's black. This happens when people barbecue and grill, and you get all that wonderful, has a wonderful smell. It's called polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And they smell wonderful and they taste wonderful, but they're probably one of the worst things you can put in your body, because there are actual potent carcinogens in blackened foods, and it's not a good idea to ingest those. If you are going to go out and eat those things, you can protect yourself to a certain extent from the carcinogenic effects by taking some vitamin C before and after consuming a meal like that. But it's best to try and minimize the consumption of any of these browned or blackened proteins. The neolite protein is processed at body temperature, but never raised above 98.6 degrees. It's broken down with enzymes, so it is digestible. And as I indicated, when you cook protein, it becomes much more difficult to digest. So you can have all the amino acids in a protein food, but if it's overcooked, you're not going to be able to use that very well, particularly if your digestive apparatus is compromised. And as we get older, we get a decline in hydrochloric acid and pancreatic enzymes. So particularly as people age and get up, near where I am, near 80, it's a good idea to keep betazyme or beta-gestin enzyme on hand for those meals that are cooked, so that you can break down and digest them, and they don't trigger problems. Because when you don't digest a food, that's when it creates problems. Undigested food particles trigger food intolerance and food allergies. And then that can spread and cause all kinds of inflammation in the body.
We're almost at an hour, but there are two more things in the detox, the BetaGuard and the Neolax. Do you want to just touch on those real quickly?
Yes, the BetaGuard, originally that was called ToxGuard, and Dr. First, what he did is he exposed laboratory animals to environmental compounds that caused cancer. And then he studied which nutrients would prevent the cancer. And Betagard was the result of putting together all of the compounds that he found that enabled the body to process carcinogens and prevent the development of cancer from the toxins in the environment. That is a wonderful supplement, and it has an oleoresin of carrot in there, which I find almost addicting. It smells so good, and it's also I always feel a lift when I use the Betagard. The Neolax.
Before, real quickly, I just jump in there. A lot of people have found the Betagard to be helpful with their allergies. The other thing that I've noticed is that when people take the Betagard, because it helps leach out heavy metals, sometimes they get a metallic taste in their mouth. So just to know that that's okay, that your body's detoxifying.
Yes, and I like to encourage people to use Betagard when they have eye problems also, because it seems to really be beneficial for cataracts and macular degeneration and things like that. The Neolax, one of the, we had spent a whole hour talking about constipation and the problems that develop. But if a person does not have regular elimination, bacteria overgrow in the colon. And this is called dysbiosis. Creates a lot of health problems because when you stretch out the colon because elimination is not normal, then you get excesses of bacteria and they release toxins in the system that get absorbed in the circulation, create all kinds of problems. So the Neolax is a way to quickly empty the colon of a lot of these pathogens, because when you eliminate, you can remove as much as 1/3 to 2/3 of the bacteria in the digestive tract. That lowers the levels of any toxins that these things might be producing. So that's a good, quick, short-term solution to toxins that are accumulating in the colon. The long-term solution is to supplement with fiber on a regular basis. And one of the things, if you want to read up on the importance of fiber, there's a number of good books. David Rubin has a book on, it's called Fiber Could Save Your Life. And I've read a couple of books on the life of Dennis Burkitt. He was convinced that lack of fiber was as serious a problem, if not more so, than sugar was in the diet. And a good, healthy fiber intake will promote the growth of beneficial bacteria, and it also keeps the elimination regular and prevents the buildup of pathogenic organisms in the digestive tract. So the Neolax will work short term in 3 days there, and then long term. You should be getting a minimum of 25 grams of fiber a day, and you can go online and get a list of the fiber content of foods. Primitive peoples get as much as 100 grams of fiber a day. So our fiber intake is pretty lacking. The average American gets about 8 grams of fiber a day, and you can't be healthy unless you're getting at least 25 grams of fiber a day.
Okay, excellent. I know the Neolax works very well. For me, I don't need to use it very often, but if I just take it the night before I go to bed, the next morning things are, it's wonderful. One quick question on that. People that have loose stool or constipation, now the constipation, the Neolax is going to help with that, and the fiber will help with that. What about a person who has loose stool?
A loose stool, usually fiber will help with that, because it'll encourage the growth of beneficial organisms. Sometimes people will have allergic responses to foods that will cause a loose stool. Also, the body wants to dump something because they're extremely allergic to it. So evaluation as far as if they're consuming something they might be allergic to, like gluten. Gluten will often cause a loose stool. It would be something to look at also.
Okay. So the acidophilus would help both with loose stool and yeah.
Yeah, the better
Okay.
you digest, the more regular the stool is. And there's actually something that I used to use in my slide presentations. It's called the Bristol stool chart. And you can Google that, and it shows you 7 different kinds of stools, everything from rock hard stool to diarrhea. And so you can, evaluate your own stool and see where it is as far as the health evaluation from the Bristol stool chart.
Okay. Great.
I used to have that hanging on the wall in my office, but I took it down because it wasn't too appropriate for people.
I'm gonna say that's not maybe what most people would consider art.
That's
Okay. Well, Stephanie, did you have any closing remarks or questions?
No, I just want to thank you for your time. This is really informative, and I appreciate you coming on here and doing this, both of you.